In the 14th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna begins by explaining our association with material nature. Earlier, Krishna has said that Bhumi apo nalo vayur kham mano buddhi revacha ahankara ityam me bhinna prakriti ashtada. So Krishna has said earlier that earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and your ego, they are all parts of the inferior energy. Aparayam itastvanyam prakritim vidhi me param jiva bhutam mahabhao yayedam dharyate jagat. And Krishna explains that you are not that prakriti, that inferior prakriti, but you are part of my superior energy, which is sustaining and maintaining creation. So how did this prakriti and how did the soul come together? Elsewhere, Krishna has pointed out, Mamai Vamso Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana Mana Shastendriyani Prakriti Sthani Karshati. So Krishna has been explaining that you are but a fragment of me, the superior energy that you are is a fragment of me, and therefore you are struggling with your mind and your senses. So we are not Prakriti, we are Purush. And that Purush is a fragment of the Supreme Purush. And this fragment that we are have somehow become associated with Prakriti. And Prakriti and the Purush that you are struggling constantly. So Krishna explains in the 14th chapter how the association of the individual soul or the individual Purush and Prakriti came about. So Krishna explains in the 14th chapter, 3rd text, Mama yonir mahad brahma tasmin garbham dadamyaham sambhava sarva bhutanam tato bhavati bharata. So Krishna explains that I impregnate material nature. I impregnate Prakriti. The superior energy impregnates Prakriti or inferior energy and making possible the birth of all living beings. So God is the Supreme Purush, and this Supreme Purush impregnates Prakriti. There are many not perfect translations available, but the word Mahat, Mahat means the totality of Prakriti. So Krishna explains that this Mahat, which is the totality of Prakriti, is impregnated by him, the Supreme Purush. And as a result of this impregnation, the birth of all living beings comes about. And therefore Krishna says, Sarva yonishu kaunteya murtaya sambhavanti tasham brahma mahad yonir aham bija pradapitah. So Krishna explains that the womb is Prakriti and he is the seed-giving father. And these fragments of himself, whom he impregnates into Prakriti, leads to an association between Purush and Prakriti, the individual Purush or the individual soul and Prakriti, which is what we are. We are but a fragment of God, similar in quality, but infinitesimal in quantity. And we are contained in an envelope of Prakriti, which is this earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and ego. But further, Krishna explains that this Prakriti has intrinsic three qualities. Whether it is earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, ego, all of these have three intrinsic qualities. And these intrinsic qualities are called sattva, rajas, and tamaha. So in 14th chapter, 5th text, Krishna explains, Sattvam rajas tamas iti guna prakriti sambhava nibadhananti mahabhao dehinam avyayam. Prakriti, he says, consists of three qualities, three modes, three gunas. And these three gunas are sattva, rajas, and tamas. In English, we can speak of them as goodness, passion, and ignorance. And then he explains that when the individual soul, the Jivatma, comes in contact with Prakriti, he becomes conditioned by Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. So, we are individual souls. We are associated with Prakriti, which forms the rest of us. And having formed the rest of us, the mind, intelligence, ego, and physical body, we have become so conditioned by these sattva, rajas, tamas gunas that we have actually become deluded into believing that we are indeed this body, mind, and intelligence and ego. So, one who becomes free from Prakriti, one who becomes free from the three gunas, one who becomes, shall we say, Jivan Mukt, is said also to be one who is Guna Atitha, one who has realized that he is not this Prakriti, that he transcends these gunas, and having transcended these gunas, he is known as Guna Atitha. So in fact, Krishna points out in text 19, he says, in 14th chapter, there is nothing other than these three gunas in all activities. And God is transcendental to these activities. When you know that, you will realize that you also can transcend these three gunas. And when you transcend Prakriti and when you transcend these three gunas, you will become free from birth and death and old age and distress. And you can enjoy nectar of immortality. So Krishna explains, Gunan etan atityatrin dehi dehe samudbhavam janma mrityu jara dukhair vimukto amritam ashnute. So Krishna explains to Arjuna, and he says that when the individual soul is able to transcend these three gunas, he becomes free from janma, mrityu, jara, dukhair. He becomes free from birth, death, old age, and distress. And vimukto amritam ashnute. And thus he becomes free from Prakriti and enjoys immortality, which is the nature of the soul. So Krishna asks Arjuna, or rather Arjuna asks Krishna, Arjuna Vacha, in 14th chapter, 21st text, Kair linges trin guna netan atito bhavati prabho kim acharya kim katham chaitam strin gunan ativartate. So he says, my dear Lord, by what symptoms is one known who has become free from Prakriti, who has become Jivan Mukt, who has become Gunatita? How does he behave? And also, how does he transcend the three gunas? So he says, Arjuna asks Krishna, that I would also like to transcend these three gunas. I would like to become free from birth and death and old age and disease and fault and misfortune and unhappiness. I would like to become free from suffering. So I don't want to be associated with Prakriti. I want to become Guna Atitha. So how will I behave when I become Guna Atitha? And not only how will I behave, but also you tell me, how can I become free from the gunas? So then Krishna explains to Arjuna that one who becomes free from the gunas is indifferent to the gunas. See, please try to understand the gunas, because they are a creation of God, they are all perfect. So that Sattvagun is perfect, Rajagun is perfect, Tamagun is perfect. You will say, how can goodness be perfect, and how can passion be perfect, and how can ignorance be perfect? All of them cannot be perfect. All of them cannot be the same. But to understand this, you should understand that the problem with Prakriti exists only and only when we identify with Prakriti. There is nothing wrong with your ego, nothing wrong with your mind, there is nothing wrong with your intelligence, there is nothing wrong with your body. What is wrong, which causes suffering to you, is that you as the soul have begun to identify with Prakriti. By itself, Sattvagun stands for harmony. This is a natural state of harmony. Rajagun stands for activity. Tamagun stands for rest and sleep. So what happens is that this physical body, which is made of these three gunas, has need for all three. When you find yourself yawning and you find yourself rubbing your eyes because you are too sleepy, what does it mean? It means that Tamagun is active. When you feel restless and you want to go and move and do some activity, that means Rajagun is active. When you feel at peace and in harmony, and whatever you're doing is occurring in perfect harmony, this is called Sattvagun. But when you identify with Sattvagun, then this identification with Sattvagun becomes complacency, self-satisfaction. I am so good, I am so spiritual, I have so much knowledge. Therefore, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains that one who's in Sattvagun, who identifies with Sattvagun, his Prakriti may be in Sattvagun, that is fine. But the moment you identify with that Sattvagun and you think, I am Sattvagun, I am that Prakriti, then that Sattvagun starts thinking that, oh, I am so peaceful, I am so spiritual, you see, and I am so happy, I am so knowledgeable. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains that Sattvagun, being Prakriti, despite being perceived or misperceived as the highest state, actually is also entrapping you. And how does it entrap you? Because people who are in Sattvagun are trapped by the idea of knowledge. Jnana sangena badnati, sukha sangena chanaga. So one is that you want to be knowledgeable, and the other is that you want to be happy. If you go to any satsang anywhere, you will find hordes of people who are in sattva-gun. Or you will find people who at that time, during the satsang at least, are in sattva-gun. Because they are desiring knowledge. They are desiring happiness. And they come for satsang with the idea of gaining knowledge and gaining happiness. So, the association of people for gathering knowledge and for pursuing happiness is satsang. But actually, one who is Guna Atitha, one who desires to transcend the gunas, and indeed has transcended the gunas, he is Vivikta Desha Sevitvam Jana Aratir Samshadi. He is not the person who seeks satsang. He is not the person who seeks satsang. Bhagavad Gita, and nowhere in Bhagavad Gita will you find the word satsang. I challenge you. Find me one word that says satsang in the Bhagavad Gita. It says Vivikta Desha Sevitvam Jana Aratir Samshadi. He says these people desire to be apart from the general mass of people who are entangled. And entangled in what way? Sattvagun, Rajagun, Tamagun. Yes, they may be pursued by people who are in Sattvagun. They may be sought after by people who are in Sattvagun. They may be asked questions and they may have to answer, or they may have to teach people who are in Sattvagun. But they themselves want to remain apart from everyone. Similarly, when you feel that you need to be active, you want to take a walk, you want to go to work, there's so much to be done, that is called Rajagun. But when you become attached to Rajagun, when you misidentify with Rajagun, then it is not just activity, then it becomes desire, then it becomes longing, it becomes kama, it becomes trishna. And then you desire to do work to get something. That is called karma. So you are entrapped by the idea of desires and longing. You are trapped by the desire of seeking the fruits of your action. This is what happens when you identify with Rajagun. Otherwise, Rajagun is perfect, because Rajagun simply means active. One, the Prakriti desires to be active. Similarly, when we come to Tamagun, Tamagun is required by the body because Tamagun tells you that it is time to rest. When your bedtime comes, when your body needs rest, you will begin to yawn, you will begin to stretch, you will want to lie down, you will want to take a nap. All of that is perfect. All of that is perfect because you have Tamagun as part of Prakriti, and when Tamagun requires to rest and recuperate, it manifests Tamagun. Unfortunately, when you misidentify with Prakriti, then what happens? Then you don't see it as the Prakriti requires rest and recuperation. You begin to identify with Prakriti and you become pramada. Pramada means, it's often translated as madness, but pramada actually means one who is heedless, who will not listen to good advice, who will not bother about anybody else. So you become pramada. Alasya, you become lazy. You get into delusion, moha. All these are signs of the jiva who gets misidentified with Prakriti in Tamagun. So Rajagun, Tamagun, Sattvagun, they are all perfect. because they're all required by this Prakriti for its functioning. But when you begin to misidentify, the soul begins to misidentify with Prakriti, then this Sattva Gun becomes a pair of golden handcuffs, Rajagun becomes a pair of stainless steel handcuffs, and Tamagun becomes a pair of rusty iron handcuffs. No one can be purely in Sattvagun, no one can be purely in Rajagun, no one can be purely in Sattvagun. Krishna explains that Sattvagun, Rajagun, Tamagun are constantly battling it out amongst themselves to see who will become more prominent. So when you get up in the morning at Brahma Muhurt, then you will suddenly realize that you are in Sattvagun. When you are active during the day in your job, in your work, in your profession, you will realize that your Prakriti is in Rajagun. In the evening and night time, when bedtime comes, when you are tired and you want to rest and you want to stretch out and go to sleep, you will realize this Prakriti is in Tamagun. Therefore, if you identify with them, you'll end up with a lot of problems. You are attached to knowledge and you're attached to happiness. Then no matter how many spiritual books you read, you are dissatisfied. Arey, why Bhagavad Gita? Let's do something new. Let's do something new. Because you want more knowledge. You don't realize you have to cross beyond knowledge. Similarly, you are attached to the idea of happiness. Oh, but I've been studying Bhagavad Gita, I'm still not fully happy. You fool. If you study and apply Bhagavad Gita, your objective is to cross beyond joy and sorrow, not to become happy. Only an idiot thinks that he has to become happy by reading Bhagavad Gita. He has to learn how to cross beyond joy and sorrow. That is the purpose of Bhagavad Gita. So therefore, you see that Sattva Gun or Prakriti is separate from you, you are happy. If you identify with Sattva Gun, even Sattva Gun will make you miserable. Rajagun can make you full of desire and longing, kama, krishna. You want the fruits of your labor. This is Rajagun when you misidentify with it. But when you understand that Prakriti requires activity, you will engage in activity. You may go for a run, you may go to the gym, you may go for your work, but you will engage in activity. Similarly, in Tamagun, when you realize that you are not Prakriti, then you will stretch out and naturally go to sleep. But if you think that you are Prakriti, then you will become Ratka Raja. Then you will become Pramada, Alasya, Moha. All of them will come onto you. Heedlessness, laziness, delusion. You will go out for a night on town. You like to go pub hopping instead of wanting to go and go back to sleep. So the Guna Atitha, the person who has crossed beyond these three gunas, Krishna describes in the 14th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita in texts 22 to 25. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Prakasham cha pravrittim cha moham eva cha pandava na dveshati sampravritani na nivritani kankshati. He says you will identify when you have become truly beyond the three gunas, when you are indifferent to the gunas. So prakasham cha, when you are in a state of sattva gun, when pravrittim cha, when you are in a state of rajagun, moham eva cha pandava, when you feel that it's time to go to rest. So then you will neither reject either guna or any one of the gunas, neither will you aspire for one of the other gunas. See, there are foolish people in this world who, despite reading and sometimes aspiring to teach Bhagavad Gita, tell you, oh, tamagun is bad, oh, rajagun is bad, now be only in sattvagun. Why don't people realize that's the most idiotic comment ever? Because they have never understood what Bhagavad Gita is saying. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that you have to become indifferent to sattvagun, indifferent to rajagun, indifferent to tamagun. You have to understand that you are none of these gunas. And because you are none of these gunas, you neither reject a guna, neither do you crave for a guna. Don't try to change your gunas. Your gunas have come to you because Prakriti desired that they should have that guna dominant at that time. So Krishna explains whether he is in Sattvagun, Rajagun, Tamagun. He neither rejects one guna, neither does he aspire or crave another guna. He says, Udasino ye vadasino, gunair yo na vichalyate, yo guna vartante itte evam, yo avitishtate nengate. So Krishna is explaining to Arjuna that he is unconcerned which gunas are active. He stays beyond the three gunas. This is the nature of a person. He is completely neutral to which guna is active. He doesn't say, I've got now, tamagun is there, now let me get out of tamagun. He doesn't think, oh, now I'm in rajagun, I should get out of rajagun. He understands he is beyond all the gunas. And therefore, the gunas all function perfectly within him. Therefore, he says, Tulya ninda stutir samstuti. Tulya ninda atma samstuti. Man apmanayos tulyas. So whether he is in pain or in pleasure, whether he is in honor or is in dishonor, whether he is with a friend or whether he is an enemy, whether he is looks at, gold or a piece of rock with equal vision, Sarvaramba Parityagi Guna Atitha sa uchyate. He is completely free from honor and dishonor. He treats friend and foe alike. He has abandoned all selfish undertakings. Such a person is said to have transcended the three gunas. So this is the nature of a person who's gunatit. He is indifferent to the gunas. He understands each guna has its role and part to play. So he does not struggle with the gunas. An unrealized soul, he struggles with the gunas. Mamayonso jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana mana shastindriyani prakriti sthani karshyati. See, the nature of the unrealized soul is to struggle with prakriti. Why are you in tamagun? Come on, get out of tamagun. Why are you in rajagun? Get out of rajagun. He simply is aware that he is beyond all the three gunas. Therefore, pain and pleasure, a rock, a stone, a piece of gold is all equal emotionally to him. He is wise. He holds praise and blame to be the same. He has abandoned all selfish undertakings. Such a person, Krishna says, is one who is Guna Atitha. And then Krishna is asked by Arjuna, how can I become that way? How can I cross beyond the gunas? And Krishna answers, to cross beyond the gunas, then without any interruption, without any failure, without any distraction, engage in bhakti yoga. And then you will cross beyond the three gunas. And you will be situated on the platform of undifferentiated Brahman. Mam chayo avyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityetan brahma bhuya kalpate. When without fail, without interruption, without distraction, you are engaged in devotional service, bhakti yoga, then when you are absorbed in serving God and forgetting self, you will cross beyond the gunas and you will be elevated to the platform of Brahman. And Krishna explains that he is the foundation of Brahman. He is the fount of Brahman. He is the source of Brahman. So he says in conclusion, Brahmano hi pratishtaham amritasya vyasya cha shashvatasya cha dharmasya sukhasya aikantikasya cha. I am the foundation of Brahman. I am the source of Brahman. I am that from which Brahman emanates. This is the constitutional position of ultimate bliss, which is immortal, imperishable, and eternal. So, a person who is Guna Atitha has become Guna Atitha because he is engaged in Bhakti Yoga without distraction, deviation, without interruption. And having crossed beyond Brahman, he is indifferent to the gunas. He is indifferent to whether this body and mind and intelligence and ego, they are in Rajagun, in Sattvagun, or they are in Tamagun. He is indifferent to the world. He looks upon rock, a piece of gold, with equal vision, equal emotional vision. And whether he is honored, whether he is dishonored, whether he is praised, whether he is abused, he remains the same. Because he is situated on the platform of Brahman. So I'll pause here. If there are any questions on this Guna Atitha, please ask me now.
Yes, Dr. Shantanu. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Shantanu, the first question we have is, can you please explain what all is contained in the Prakriti? Is Mother Nature included in it?
I can't hear you.
Okay, I'll repeat the question.
Slowly.
Can you please explain what all is contained in the Prakriti? Is Mother Nature included in it?
Yeah, Prakriti is nature itself. Everything in nature is contained in Prakriti. Everything that you see, smell, hear, taste, touch, whatever you perceive through your senses is called Prakriti.
Right. Should I ask the next question?
Pardon?
Should I ask the next question?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Dr. Shantanu, we have a question as in, can someone negate their karma to zero?
Can someone negate their karmas to zero? As long as you have a sense of self, you have karma. When you transcend your sense of self, when your sense of self exists no further, when you have realized that sense of self, your ahankar, your ego, your autobiographical self, your sense of self is no more, then there is no karma. Karma exists for Prakriti. When you are free from Prakriti, there is no karma. So when you have crossed beyond karma, when you are free from Prakriti, when you are Guna Atitha, you are free from the effects of karma. In that sense, your sense of self is the glue that keeps the soul connected to Prakriti. When you dissolve that sense of self or ego or ahankar by remembering God and forgetting self, then your karmas also are no longer going to affect you. So while you are in the body, your prakriti will experience some parts of its actions. But if you are fully aware that you are not that prakriti, you will remain unaffected by what is happening to your prakriti. And when you leave this prakriti, you will not return again to take another body of prakriti. Does it answer the question, or you have some, need some further elaboration?
Thank you, Dr. Shantanu. The next question that we have is, you mentioned being indifferent to gunas, becoming indifferent to gunas. So where does one really start for a layman, for someone like me, or the audience who's watching this? Where does one really start building up? This whole
So
concept
Krishna
of
says that you reach that stage of becoming Guna Atitha when you perform bhakti yoga without any interruption, without any disturbance, without any distraction. Mam chayo avhyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sa gunan samatitetan brahma bhuya kalpate. So therefore, you start by remembering God and forgetting self. Offer every single action that you are engaged in to God. Yat karoshi, yad ashnasi, yat juhosi dadasi, yat tapasyasi kaunteya tad kurushamadarpana. Whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer, whatever you give away, whatever charities, whatever austerities you perform, everything you do it for Krishna. And when you are not engaged in performing tasks or duties or activity, so that your mind does not lead you further towards the formation of the self and attach you further to your karmas, you engage in chanting God's name, as I have advised in all the lectures that have preceded this one.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Shantanu. Dr. Shantanu, another question, that we have is in the working world, as we like to call it, the corporate world. Is it in the working world, in the corporate world, like we, call it, is it wrong to ask for, something that you feel you deserve? Say, in this context, it might be a promotion, or it might be a salary raise, or something of that sort. So basically, is it wrong to have desire that you think you deserve?
I have explained to you that it is natural to have desires, but now we have no longer desires for ourselves, we desires to please God. So we desire to perform our duties in the most perfect way as an offering to God. And if God is pleased by your offering, there may be signs of God's pleasure, like a raise, like a promotion, or perhaps an indication that you must move somewhere else.
Right. Thank you. And the last question that we have, Dr. Shantanu, is that to go beyond joy and sorrow, what is the one thing that you should always keep in mind to go beyond that realm of joy and sorrow? What is the one thing?
Remember God and forget self.
Right. Right. Great. So remember God and forget self. Thank you, Dr. Shantanu. These were the questions that we had this week. If you want to tell us, we have some time. If you want to tell us what all we can look forward in the next session, or you want to add some pointers here itself about this session, you can go ahead. I'm saying we have some time. So if you want to tell us about the next session or add some pointers about this session, you can go ahead.
So about this session, it's important to understand that all the gunas are perfect. Don't let anyone push you or con you into believing that one guna is better than the other. Each of them is perfect at its time, because everything that happens in the world happens by God's will. Not a blade of grass moves without God's consent. If it bends on the left side, it is by God's consent. If it bends on the right side, it is by God's consent. The Brihadaranyaka Upanishad says, Tena vina tranamapi na chalati. Not a blade of grass moves without his consent. Therefore, God decides whether your Prakriti should manifest Tamagun, whether your Prakriti should manifest Rajagun, or your Prakriti should manifest Sattvagun. And all you have to do is let your Prakriti act according to the guidance of God. You can struggle with Prakriti if you want. Mamai vanso jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana mana shastendriyani prakritistani karshati. You can struggle with your mind and your five senses with Prakriti. You can struggle with your mind and your five senses. Being the soul, you are struggling with Prakriti. But Krishna says you can't overcome Prakriti because Prakriti is also his divine energy. Only when you surrender unto God, then you will cross beyond Prakriti. Devi asaguna mai mama maya duratyaya mam eva ye prapadyante maya metam tarantite. He says, God says that Prakriti is Devi asaguna mai. The Prakriti is my divine energy. You cannot effectively conquer it. But when you surrender unto me, you can cross beyond it. You will become Guna Atitha. Ultimately, Prakriti is also under God's direction. Maya Dyakshena Prakriti Suyate Sacharacharam Hetuna Nena Kaunteya Jagad Viparivartate. Krishna says Prakriti is working under my direction. And all living entities are moving here and there with their Prakriti because I am guiding them and directing them. So also God is directing you. Ishvara sarva bhutanam hridedesha arjuna tishtati brahmyan sarva bhutani yantrarodhani maya. God is seated in your heart and he is guiding you onward towards your destiny. Right? You are only seated in a machine made of material energy, which is Prakriti. But Krishna says that you learn to surrender unto me. And when you surrender unto me, you will cross beyond Prakriti. You will follow in the direction I am leading you. And I will take you to the supreme destination. So, Prakriti is a problem if you struggle with it. I want that promotion. I want that raise. I want this. I want that in the world. Instead, you be having a strong faith that God is doing everything and whatever God is doing is perfect for me. Even what he's denying me is because if I was to get it, it will be bad for me. In fact, it was Steve Jobs who said that everything you can understand when you connect the dots looking backwards. That life is perfect. Everything that is happening perfectly. And you need to look upon your life as being perfect and have faith in going forward that it's happening perfectly. Then you will become free from desire. Just do your duties in the world as an offering to God with love and with devotion. Chant constantly to keep your mind silent and have faith that whatever is happening is perfect.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Shantanu. And we look forward to having you next week with us. If you want to tell us what you will be covering in the next session.
I think every time I'm telling you, so let next time be a surprise.
Sure. No problem. So we look forward to having you next week. Thank you so much for watching and tune in next Thursday at 8 a.m. Thank you so much. Hari Om.
Hari Om, Jai Shri Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Thank you.